Welcome to this tutorial, Inform 7 Programming Turning a Transcript into a Working Game. I'm Dennis Jers. I'm teaching a class on digital storytelling at Seton Hill University. I've already introduced my students to interactive fiction, and we've experimented a little with using Inform 7 to code. In this video, I'm going to start with a text that's written as if it's the transcript of a working game, and I'll show you how to code up that game. But first, let me run the sample game that I'm about to create. I'll run it from within Inform's own onboard game player. John Henry went up to the mountains, said a man ain't nothing but a man. Before that steam drill beats me down, I'll die with my hammer in my hand. Hammer, an interactive fiction by Dennis Jers, with the tagline, "Who needs steam? Punk?" North Woods, the May sunlight, plays a devilish game of hide-and-seek in the branches of the tolerant oaks and the proper birches. If any of them minds, they ain't saying. The deer path, too low down to get any sunlight, slinks off to the south. Okay, well, let's see what we've got here. I will type I for inventory. What am I carrying? Carrying a 40-pound hammer. Examine hammer. It's the work hammer your daddy gave you the night the men with torches came. His rough hands had helped you to hold it up. On the day you was born, he said, laughing, you picked up this hammer and a little piece of steel and you sang out, "Hammer's gonna be the death of me, Lord, Lord." Mama was crying but wouldn't say why. Then it was the angry men shouting in your ears and the smoke in your eyes and the bump bump of the hammer as you dragged it into the woods. Examine me, it's good looking as ever. Well, that's actually a default That's a default message from Inform 7. I'll put something better there in a minute. Actually, why don't I do that right now? I'm going to add, let's see. How about this? All right. So I'm going to hit replay. I'm going to rerun this game again. And now, when I examine me, it says, despite everything, it's good to feel healthy and strong and alive this morning. Okay, so let's keep interacting with our game. Now, in interactive fiction, I can drop hammer. Now when I type inventory, which is short for take inventory, it says I'm carrying nothing. And now when I look, it says you can see your 40-pound hammer here. Take hammer, look there. I've just changed the environment. Inform 7 is very good at handling things like object inventory and placement and location and containment, and things like that. Okay, so this description of the starting location, the starting room, has this thing that says the deer path slinks off to the south. So let's go south and let's see. We're in a clearing. The valley yawns all the way to the rising sun. The path ambles in from the north, wandering in no particular rush southeast toward the work camp. Your shack lies to the west. Now if I go north, I'll be back in the North Woods where I just started. I go south again. Let's go west into the shack. Just cozy enough for you and Pollyann. Pollyann lies here asleep on the bed. You can also see a kitchen table on which are them lawyer papers here. Well, how about I examine Pollyann? Even with tear-streaked cheeks, she's a fine woman. Better leave her be. She's like to start crying again. Okay, well, how about I just says better leave her be. All right, well, okay, that's not all that interesting. Perhaps we could code a more textually interesting response to that command. Okay, so let's look back here. We see a kitchen table. All right, well, how about I examine papers? Man who brought them papers said eviction means got to pay the landlord $20 by sundown. Well, I can take the papers. Whoops. Well, that's because it's called papers. I can try to take table. All right, well, that's reasonable. I suppose I could. Well, I guess I can't. All right. Pollyan's asleep on the bed. I could. Examine bed. No, I guess I can't. Oh, all right. I'm just demonstrating for you that when the game world mentions something like, here, Pollyann lies here asleep on the bed, I see that word bed and I expect to interact with it. But if I can avoid this problem if I go into the code, and where's the Pollyann section? Here we go. I could just say Pollyann lies here asleep. I'll hit replay to rerun all this. And now there's no reference to the bed, so my typing examining bed, if it says you can't see any such thing, it really doesn't matter. Now I can also have here understand paper as them lawyer papers. W-Y-E-R, there we go. Okay. So now, when I rerun this, and I, here, when I type take paper, previously it gave me an error message, now it lets me do it. So I'm just demonstrating with a little bit of tweaking, you can make the game a little bit more friendly. Now, let me keep working my way through the game. Now, I remember from playing this game that I went west to go into the shack, but if you type look, there's nothing that reminds you which way to go out. I might try out. Right now that doesn't work, but as it happens, we go east. Okay, and then this description mentions if I go southeast, I'll go toward the work camp. Southeast. Work camp. The hum of men's voices and the percussion of their tools striking rock fill the valley with the music of labor. Shaker Jim pokes his knobby head around a corner. John Henry, Captain Tommy say he want you, he says. He with that salesman again. Shaker Jim strolls off muttering. Captain Tommy's office is west. West. Captain Tommy's office. A mess of railroad charts and papers clutter the desk. On the wall by the window, a big map shows where the Big Bed Tunnel will go. You can see Captain Tommy and Salesman Pratt here. Hello, John Henry, says Captain Tommy. Salesman Pratt, he steps forward. Your captain tells me you're the fastest steel driver in the valley. If you can beat my steam drill, I'll give you $20. Interested? Okay, and I might try saying yes, and in Form 7 will give its canned response. That was a rhetorical question because I haven't implemented this part of the game. This is as far as I've gotten in the game right now. Now that we've had a brief run-through of the working game that we're going to create, I'm going to take you now to the transcript assignment that I asked my students to complete. I asked them to write out a prologue, a title card, the description of the starting location, a list of nearby objects, what the computer will respond when you type examine me, and how the player will, what inventory, what items the player is carrying at the beginning of the game, and how to interact with each of these objects, and then a short list of actions that you expect your player to try, along with what will happen next in the game. And I showed my students an example of a kind of a silly Star Trek game that starts off with the captain nods at the assembled recruits, space the final frontier, he intones, and you're playing a character who is kind of a ship's grammar commando who's got special orders from Starfleet to exterminate grammar errors with a special issue phaser. It's very silly, but I had fun creating it, and I did actually code up this game, but so that my students can follow along from the beginning, I want to show a completely different transcript. This is the transcript for the John Henry Steel Driving Man game that I just demonstrated. So this is the transcript that we're going to be using. We'll build a game from this transcript. And here we have the prologue, we have the banner text, we have a starting location, we have objects. I guess this should technically be there. Okay, so that's your 40-pound hammer that you can see. I want the player to be able to interact a little bit with the trees and the path, which are mentioned here in the opening description. And the player will examine yourself. I don't want my character to start off carrying anything. I've decided instead of having the character carrying the hammer, I want it to be on the ground, because when you pick up the hammer, I want to have this character building text that says, "Now a steel-driven man's got nothing to fear, not with a hammer like this in his hand." You know what I like? Not with a 40-pound hammer in his hand. I think that's just the rhythm of that as I was saying it. Now a steel-driven man's got nothing to fear, not with a 40-pound hammer in his hand. I think the rhythm of that line sounds better now that I'm speaking it out loud. Okay, so take the hammer, go south, examine shack, enter shack or go west, some stuff to do inside the shack, and then here's a little bit of interaction that we can see down here. And I imagine maybe you could take Pratt's hand, hit Pratt with hammer, say yes, say no. Maybe you'll want to look at in Captain Tommy's office. Something that I won't have time to implement it now, but I thought maybe remember these legal papers. Where are them legal papers in the lawyer papers? I thought maybe the lawyer papers would be on a particular color of paper. And maybe if you examined the papers on Captain Tommy's office, you'd see, a freshly purchased stack of that color of envelopes to suggest that Captain Tommy is in on this whole thing, in that Captain Tommy has ordered the landlord to force you to participate in this contest. I thought maybe I could do something like that. It's probably too much for us to do, but it might be fun, something fun to look at if you were interested in expanding a game like this. That might be how you could slip a little hint in the game. Okay, so I am now going to start a new Inform 7 project. Here, I'll just do it from here. We'll do File, New Project. I keep the defaults. I'm going to drag this. I can see this in another window, so I'm going to leave that transcript in another window, and I'll get my Inform back again. Okay, so here we go. I'll start a new project. I'm going to call this Tutorial 2. We'll create it, and we'll get ourselves set up. All right, so let me get my... All right, so let's call this game Hammer, and we need a room. Okay, and remember, in interactive fiction, that's really all you need to have a game. It's a very boring game right now, but that's all you need. So let's give this room a description. I'm going to copy and paste text. And now when we run it, now we see that text comes off there. So next, let's see. How about let's add that we need steampunk line. And we do that by doing okay, who needs steam? Punk? Doesn't like that. And why is that? Because instead of printing a banner, it should be printing a banner text. Inform 7 is incredibly persnickety. Actually, it's not Inform 7's fault. It's any computer programming language is incredibly persnickety. Okay, now, the problem is this line, who needs steampunk, is kind of buried. So I want to write a paragraph break to separate it out. Okay, a little bit more visible. Maybe instead of a paragraph break, I'll do a line break. And let's do bold type. And then we need to turn off bold type by doing Roman type. All right, there we go. And now this line is bumping against North Woods. So again, I'm going to add a line break. Okay, now that feels better to me. Okay, good. So let's create an object. Your 40-pound hammer is in the North Woods. Now I can take hammer. There it is in my inventory. I look, it's no longer in the North Woods. Drop hammer, there we go. Okay. Examine hammer. Well, I see nothing special about the hammer. Let's give the hammer some special text. Okay. And how's that? So far, so good. All right, now I actually want to signal to the reader that this hammer is very important. I'm going to add a paragraph break, and I'm going to add more text. I'm going to add a couple paragraphs. Again, I'm just copying from my off-screen stash. So let's see how that goes. Okay. All right, so that's working out pretty well. And how about now I pick the, how about now I add some scenery objects? Because if I type examine, if I'm in the woods, I'm going to want to examine trees. This opening description gives a little bit of, local natural flavor. So I might want to examine sunlight. Nah. I mentioned the deer path is too low down to get any sunlight. Nah, nothing there. Well, let's create a couple scenery objects, and let's say here. I'm going to keep this here. I'm going to put the banner text up here. Here we have the first location, and I'm going to put the scenery for this location near the location. So I'll say trees are okay, so now when I examine the trees, I get if any of them old trees, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, let's examine trees. If any of them minds they ain't saying. That becomes redundant. I'm just going to leave, I'm going to cut that out. And now, if I run it and I examine trees, this becomes a little reward for a player who felt like he or she wanted to interact with the trees. Okay, so I can understand branch or branches as the trees. And now I can add some sunlight or So all these synonyms okay, so it becomes a little boring after it's repeating the same text over and over again, but that's a lot smarter than you can't see any such thing. So let us now implement the dir path and we'll say okay, see how that goes. Yay. Okay. Now, if I were to put an apostrophe there, watch what happens. We see that single quote turn to a double quote. There's a trick in Inform 7. I can't just make it a double quote, because if I do, it'll think I'm closing off this text string, and it will expect this to be some sort of a command. But I can use the square bracket, and this is telling Inform 7, I don't want you to change that single quote character to a double quote. That's really a single quote. In this case, it's an apostrophe. Now, Inform 7 is smart enough that if I were to type can't or won't, notice it's smart enough that it does not switch those to a close quotation mark. But if I did something like this, now it does not recognize that as part of the abbreviation for cannot. So just one of the little tricks that comes along with Inform 7. Okay. Examine me. That's the default response. How about now I give myself a more realistic description? And I'm trying to find the description that I created for myself earlier. Where is that? Okay, let's give myself a description, or give my character a description. So let's describe the player. And we replay. Ooh, what's my problem? It's because I typed a single quote instead of a double quote. So let's try that again. There we go. Okay. All right, so now we have a player description. I don't want my character to start off carrying anything because I'm expecting the character fairly quickly to take hammer. And I'll do a little bit of, let's do some interesting text. Taking the hammer will be one of the first things that the player does. So let's kind of acknowledge that. Rather than letting Inform 7 print out this standard message, I'm going to do, after taking the hammer, say still driving with an apostrophe, man, it's got nothing to fear, not with a 40-pound hammer in his hands. There, now instead of just taken, we have a little bit of character developing response. Okay, and probably got here, oh, wait a minute. Something that I forgot to do here is I forgot the prologue. When John Henry went up to the mountains, said a man ain't nothing but a man. Before that steam drill beats me down, I'll die with my hammer in my hand. We need to change those to double quotes. And now when we replay the game, we'll start with this opening text, but oh, wait a minute. Aha, I need to line break. I want to begin each of these lines with a line break. Let's see how that looks. That's a little better. And now just for a little bit of flash, a little bit of style, we'll do italics. Way back in the day when interactive fiction ruled the commercial games industry, the ability to display italics on your computer was awesome. So we'll show off. Paragraph break. Paragraph break to get a little space better there. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Let's do it this way. Okay, so now we see we get a little bit of nice opening text here. Now, of course, what this means is if it says I'll die with my hammer in my hand, probably there should be a little bit more text than just you drop it. You're probably not going to let go of it until you die, I suppose. I haven't gotten that far in the game, but, who knows. Maybe the game shouldn't let you just toss aside a hammer and then go on without it. But there are, if that is important in a story that you want to tell, then there are ways that it is possible to code something like that. In this tutorial, I probably won't get to that. But, all right, so I would also expect a player to try to follow this path south. So let's create a location that is south of our starting point. So let's now create a new location that will be south of this location. We've just gone south. Currently, you can't go any. We've just gone south. Currently, you can't go that way, but let's give us a place to go. And we will call it Forest clearing is south of North Woods. By the way, Inform 7 is not smart enough to know that if I called this room North Woods, then it's somehow related to compass directions. This could be anything here. Inform 7 is not going to look at the contents of this bit of text to try to guess, oh, this word north is a compass direction. It's not smart enough to figure that out. Okay, so let's if there's only one clearing in the game, I guess I don't have to type forest clearing again, but just to be safe, I'll type it again for good form. And boom. Okay. Let's replay it. And here I am in the forest clearing. Okay, so it says your shack lies to the west. I'm probably going to want to enter the shack. Now, there are a couple ways that I could implement the shack. I'm probably going to want to, if we think of the shack as something that is located in the forest clearing, the way the magic wardrobe was located in the spare room, we might run into a little problem, and I'll show you why. Let's do this. Let's say, okay, so the shack is in the forest clearing. I replay it, and aha! Well, the shack at least exists. I probably want to enter shack, but that's not something you can enter. That's all right. I can make it into the shack is an enterable container. And now when I replay it, aha! Now I can get into it. But now that I'm in the shack, when I type look, it says forest clearing in the shack. This imagines that I've sort of like put down a rubber raft in the middle of the forest clearing and gotten in the rubber raft. I'm in the shack, but since the shack is a container in the forest clearing, it's like I'm just sitting in a box in the middle of the forest. The shack here is not implemented as a separate location. What we want to do instead is think of the shack as a room, and if I say the shack is in the forest clearing, that's making, oh well, here, watch this. I can exit shack. I can exit, how's that? How about I type it correctly? There we go, I can exit, and now I can take shack, and that's not what we want. We don't want to implement the shack as something that you can pick up and carry away. If I were to implement it as a fixed in place piece of scenery, that still doesn't give me a kind of discrete separate location where I can put other objects and interact with it as a different locale in the game world. So instead of saying the shack is in the forest clearing and making an enterable container, I'm going to say the shack is west of the forest clearing. Run it, and now none of this, and now examine shack doesn't work anymore. There's clearing. Run it. Now we can go south. I can go west into the shack. Inform 7 is smart enough to know that if I went from the clearing to the shack west, I go east to get out of it. But now the shack doesn't seem to exist in the game world, and that can be a little bit frustrating. What I can do, a couple things I want to do. First, I should capitalize shack so that when we go into the shack, now that shack is capitalized. Let's give the shack a description. And I'm going to say so let's see what we got here. Okay, so we still can't examine the shack. It doesn't exist. But when we go into the shack west, just cozy enough you can Pollyann, you can see Pollyann there. You know what? I don't need to mention her there. I'm just going to say just cozy enough for 2. Run this again. A little bit of editing on the fly. There we go. I think that's nice. Okay. So, let me go back out here. I'm going to now implement. This is a little bit of a trick, but this will work, I think, nicely. I'm going to create an object called the cabin doorway, and I'm going to make it scenery in the clearing. So now, okay, it's a shack. The shack doorway is scenery. That. Okay. So, I've created a piece of scenery called the shack doorway, and that is in the forest clearing. I'm going to show you something I haven't shown you before. Let's go to index and world. Here we have a little map. NW is the North Woods, south into forest clearing, west into the shack. I click on the shack, and it tells me that Pollyann is inside the shack. Here in the North Woods we have trees, a deer path, your 40-pound hammer, and the game starts with yourself in that location. The forest clearing indicates that the shack doorway is a fixed-in-place piece of scenery with this description built with your own hands, blah, blah, blah. So this is really a very useful thing. Again, it's under index and world. As your game expands, this is a really useful way for you to sort of work your way around it and figure out what these things are all about. Okay, so I'm going to go back now to the game, and I'm going to, let's add a bit of a description for Pollyann. here, it just says you can see Pollyann here. If I did this, the description of Pollyann is, then we go south, west, examine Pollyann, and it says Pollyann lies here asleep. Instead, I'm going to change something. I'm going to drop off this description of Pollyann is, and I just put Pollyann is a woman in the shack, Pollyann lies here asleep. Watch what happens. Now, instead of saying you can see Pollyann here, now it says Pollyann lies here asleep. When I examine Pollyann, now it says you see nothing special about Pollyann. The difference is I didn't write the description of Pollyann is. Instead, I just used the quotation marks afterwards. Again, if I just wrote the shack doorway is in the clearing, and we go to the clearing, now it says build it with your own hands, which makes no sense. I actually want that to be scenery in the clearing, and I want built it with your own hands to be displayed after the player tries interacting with the shack. Okay, now from here again, I'm not actually examining this shack object. I'm examining an object called the shack doorway that is not actually located in the shack. If I examine doorway, it doesn't recognize that a doorway exists. I didn't, for the purposes of this game, need to implement a door that locks that you have to open and close. I don't want to slow down the player. If I wanted, a locked cellar that has, I don't know, a secret, treasure trove or something like that, or a secret entrance to the mines or whatever, maybe having a locked door would make sense in this game. But just to get you in the shack, to get you to see Pollyann and understand the emotional motivations for your player in the game world, I didn't need to implement a working door. And it's only here in the forest clearing, I only implemented the shack doorway because I know people are going to want to type something like enter shack. And if we do that, I can say okay, I'm going to intercept the player's attempt to enter the shack, and I'm going to supply a more personal, specific case that in this particular case, instead of entering the shack, I'll be more specific so you understand. Instead of entering the shack doorway, I'm going to intercept that action and try to trigger the go west action instead. And we'll see. I go south. I'll do enter shack. Enter shack. That triggers the go west action, and here I am in the shack. Now, something that's a little bit confusing. I have just entered the shack. I don't know which direction I went. Maybe I didn't pay attention to this direction here. Maybe I forgot that I typed west. So I'm going to want to type something like, if I entered, I want to type exit. And it's going to say you aren't in anything at the moment. So I'm going to do something like this. So that will help if I go south, enter shack, whoops, and then I pick a random direction to try to go somewhere, it'll tell me the only exit is east. Okay, and shack, exit. It says I'm not in anything at the moment. I'm going to show you a trick. I'm going to type actions. This is a debugging verb within Inform 7. Now, I type the word exit, and it gives me this cryptic thing, exiting. Okay, well, exiting has happened. So I'm going to type see how that works. Okay, so I typed actions, and now look tells me, okay, that triggers the word, that triggers the command looking. So I could type something like okay. Now when I replay this, now it says, before looking, you squint into the sunlight. I can turn actions off if I want to. And now when I look, it'll give me this you squint in the sunlight. Anyway, so if you are trying to figure out, well, how about this? What if I said, do I have the inventory? No, let's go take hammer. Okay, I'm going to drop hammer. And dropping your 40-pound hammer, okay, that's the action. And I'm going to do this. And let's run that. Okay, so this command instead of means I'm going to intercept the ordinary way Inform 7 would handle things if I typed drop hammer, and it's going to say you should really keep it. And that's actually kind of boring. You might say something like, you know, and let poly hand down give him a internally motivated reason to hang on to the hammer rather than an externally motivated reason, which is, you know, you can't finish the game if you drop the hammer. That's kind of boring. Okay, so now okay, so let's add some more detail to the interior of the shack. Let's do lawyer papers are on the shack. On the table. So let's see how that goes. Okay. Well, this is weird. Is them lawyer papers is capitalized? Well, I don't actually have to capitalize it there in the code. When I run it now, it's lowercased. I kind of like having my character refer to it as the them lawyer papers, but what's a little bit weird is the very formal on which is. Inform 7 is very good at displaying what is on other things, and it uses this kind of formal language. There's a way that I can change that, but let me show you why I would like to change that. I'm going to take the papers, I look, and now that I've taken the papers, it mentions there's a kitchen table here, which is a little bit oddly specific. I mean, now that the table only existed to hold the papers, and we don't really need to waste, you know, player's going to type, you know, examine table, move table, push table, look under table, you know. If the table is there, the player is going to try to work with it. So I'm just going to say the table is scenery in the shack. With the table not being scenery, with the table just being a default non-scenery object, we get this, you also see a kitchen table on which is them lawyer papers here. But if I run it again, with the kitchen table described as scenery, go south and west, now it just says on the kitchen table is them lawyer papers. Okay, and then if I take papers and I look, the table disappears. I can still examine table, put papers back on the table, and now when I look on the kitchen table is them lawyer papers. But if I want to signal to the reader, all you were supposed to do with the table is take those papers, I can de-emphasize the importance of the table by calling it a scenery object.